Thank you, PJ. It is time for another edition of the Pair and a Spare podcast. I'm Justin Gaard from The Fan. We've got Chip Scoggins from Football Across Minnesota, Randy Byrne, Ryan Burns, GopherIllustrated.com. Joining me, we are presented, as always, by our great friends at Jack's Cafe, JAXCafe.com. Thanks to Bill for hooking up another father and daughter for homecoming tickets on Saturday. It was pretty cool to see our guy Thad bring his daughter and tweet about that over the weekend. Great seats for kids. We just appreciate Jack's Cafe helping us help you all that listen make memories here on the Pair and a Spare podcast. Chip is under the weather today. He can't do it like he used to, Burnsy. He's been hanging around on college campuses and in young people towns like Chicago, Illinois. He is weathered today, so the mute button is going to be early and often. Is that correct, Chip?
Yeah, I got the cough drop in now. I will say this. I went to Chicago with a cold. I came back with a severe cold.
A lot of beer games, back-to-back weekends.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of beer games going on. Although Chicago, I guess, is this technically still summer? No.
Summer? No.
Well, I'd argue with the record heat. I get why you're saying that.
It felt like summer there. Man, what a glorious place to be when it's on a weekend there, when it's sunny out and warm and you're walking around Lincoln Park, that area. Goodness gracious. So it's fun.
When you're under the weather.
Yeah, I had a battle and I was hurting this weekend. And it's my birthday today and I'm sick. That's no good.
So you share a birthday with the voice of the Gophers, Mike Grimm. Have I always known this?
We text each other every year. Happy birthday. He's a year older than me. I will say that though. He's got me by a year.
So when does the AARP card come in the mail today?
It already came a few years ago.
And Chip signed up right away because he wanted to make sure when all that hit, he'd get all the benefits. He would get all the benefits.
Right.
What are we, 52 today, Chipper?
53.
53. That's right, because we're all 10 years apart, so we all turn. Okay. Well, happy birthday, Chipper.
Thank you.
Everybody wish Chip a happy birthday, and I'm sure your phone is 100% charged. You got your portable charger for your Italy trip in 6 months, so it's all good with you other than feeling bad, right?
Yeah, we actually put the charger to use in Chicago just to try it out this weekend, and what an invention, man. Holy cow.
They just came out last week, so I'm so glad you found out.
Yeah, welcome.
Chip, I'd also tell you, I showed my wife a photo of you and your daughter, and the first thing she said, and I told Guardsy this already, was, boy, there's no disputing that's his daughter. I'll tell you that much.
Do we look alike?
You look exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she's thriving in Chicago. I'll say that.
Wonderful. Well, where are you going this weekend? Which kid are you going to visit this weekend? You keeping it local for a minute?
I will be here. That was a run of 5 weekends being away from home on the road. And so I'm excited to. I'm not going to Illinois with you guys.
Nope.
I'll be at the Vikings game Sunday night, but it'll be nice to not be on the road for a weekend.
He's had a heck of a 5 weeks. Think about it: London to LA to then.
Yeah, we went Green Bay to London, LA, and then Iowa State last weekend. That was personal. I can't really complain when it's personal and personal this weekend. So, and I kept track of the. I did watch. I got through 3 quarters of the game when I got home yesterday. I was not going to watch the 4th quarter of that beat down, but I tried to follow along on my phone as I was walking around Chicago, and
as he's plugged in, I'm sure.
Yeah,
sounded like a glorious day at Huntington Bank Stadium.
I don't know how you could ask for any more. It's a good transition. I think, Burnsy, you would remember the Gophers were, 4.5-point favorites, 5.5-point favorites, somewhere in that ballpark. Yep. Maryland was coming off of a victory over USC that they somehow came back from a 2-touchdown deficit in the 4th quarter. Another game that USC loses that they somehow had pretty good control over. That's kind of the story of their season at this point. But the Gophers came out, and Burnsy, I know you were very excited that they put some points on the board early and often. They started fast, something that you had been mentioning. Chip, I went up at halftime, and I scared Daniel House, first of all, the poor guy. I just went right up behind him and started talking. He jumped like he'd seen a ghost. And I said, who is Burnsy mad at? Because Ryan's always mad at somebody or something at halftime. He's screaming at people. He's hate typing on his computer. But there was nothing for you to be mad about at halftime, Burnsy, I wouldn't think, unless you did find something to nitpick.
I can always nitpick something. You know me, Johnny Raincloud over here. But they finally are able to come out with a good first quarter. I'd argue a great first quarter with 21 points, a pick six, 14 offensive points, their first touchdown in a first quarter, I believe, all season.
Yep.
It's tough to be, especially in what was a coin flip game, whether you look at the Vegas spread, the metrics, whatever it may be. That's what you wanted to see coming off of a bye week, where it's not an off week, as PJ loved to say endlessly over the last 7 days. It's not an off week. It's a bye week. You're trying to get rested. You're trying to get a little bit more time to prepare for a Maryland team. And this was a Maryland team that had been playing really well offensively. So the way that they were able to start the game, you're able to get that huge stop on fourth down. Then the offense is able to go and respond. Another stop, another touchdown. Then you get the pick six, and you look up at the end of the first quarter, and Maryland looked, as some would say, shell-shocked, as a Terrapin might be.
Mm-hmm.
But Chipper, they were certainly trampled by turtles.
That's a great reference there, and Mike Russo would be happy about that. Watching it back, the thing that just kind of the 30,000 foot view for me was pretty amazing when you have a quarterback you can trust, huh? I mean, this team
night and day from last year at this point.
This is what I thought we would see with Cal McManus, where the identity changed. It became a offense that, hey, is that your cat or dog? I didn't see it. I just saw a tail. The offense revolving around a quarterback, and there is no doubt that Max Brosmer, in my mind, has changed PJ. I mean, and I think that last series in the first half underscored it.
Yeah.
I can't say this for sure, but I'd be willing to bet. What was it, a 21-point lead? Was it 21-3 at that point? Or
something along those lines, yeah.
Years past, he would have taken a knee and gone to the halftime feeling good about where they're at, I think. But, two things played in that. Maryland's pass defense is atrocious. Holy cow, are they bad?
Yep.
There's a reason why they're one of the top 5 worst pass defenses in college football, and it showed. But it also speaks to PJ finally has a quarterback he trusts. And he says, you know what? Good's not good enough. Let's go get some more points. And they did. And guys made plays. And I just think that Max Brosmer has caused PJ to change.
They were up 31-10 at that point. 31-10.
31-10, yeah.
When the ensuing kick off the Maryland touchdown went out of bounds, gave the Gophers the ball at the 35. And next thing you know, they're in Kesich field goal range, and they're banging through a field goal to make it 34-10. But, yeah, to me, the story of the whole season is Max Brosmer. It's just the story every week, and I'm trying to, get people to pause and actually consider what they're watching when you think about – and, Chip, you go further back than we do when it comes to covering the team. When you think about what is actually happening with Max, the fact that this has turned into an offense that can just sling it all over the place, and the quarterback doesn't care who he's throwing to. He's going to multiple progressions on some of these big, high-profile touchdown plays, including one to Elijah Spencer that Burnsy screenshotted, the pass, which was just ridiculous, where I thought he was throwing it away while I was watching it live on the sideline, and he's just throwing it to a spot where Spencer's going to go. Every conversation I have, Burnsy, I'm sure you're the same way when you're running around before the games and stuff. People want to talk about Max, and they all say the same thing. It's a shame that we only have him for 1 year. It's a shame that he's only going to be here. And I say, yeah, that's great, but let's not wish away to 2025. You still have him for 4 more games, right? And he's playing the position about as well as you can, about as well as we've ever seen for a Minnesota quarterback. So it's just a pleasure to watch the guy go to work, because that's what he's here to do, right? He's taken 2 non-degree seeking classes. He's here to do football, and he's doing it very, very well.
He is. I mean, on this 3-game winning streak that they're on, he's completing 75% of his passes, 9 touchdowns, no turnovers, which part of why I think he's changed PJ is what has PJ said for seven years. Yeah. The ball is the program, and now you got a quarterback that you continue to trust that is not going to put the ball in harm's way. You watch these games, there's maybe 1 throw a game,
right,
where that could have been a pick instead of 4 or 5 like we've seen in previous years. And that's where it's just tough to that's why I hate comparing quarterbacks and comparing eras, because we've seen Gopher quarterbacks go on a stretch like this. Like Tanner had a stretch like this in 19. Adam Weber had a stretch like this back in the day. But then you're comparing an RPO offense where Tanner really never had to get off the first read because he had 2 NFL receivers in Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman. Weber was playing, and you guys will remember better than me, more of like a West Coast spread type of deal.
Depending on the year, depending on which coordinator Adam Weber had in the Brewster era.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for him.
Every single year. And now with what Brosmer and Greg Harbaugh are doing, I think it's a lot more complex, but I also think it speaks to what do you want to do or what do you want to see coordinators do? You want to fit the players to whatever the scheme or I always get this comparison wrong, but I just think it's about maximizing what Max does well. And what is his number one asset? It's his processing ability, his ability to go through reads. We've talked about that UCLA touchdown to Darius Taylor. He's the fifth read on that. He went all the way right to left, got to the last option. The Elijah Spencer back of the end zone throw was ridiculous. He was the last one in that progression. That's where Elijah talked about with you, Guardsy. They've run that play in practice, and I believe he told you he's never gotten the ball once there.
Yeah, Chip, I asked him on the field, give me your perspective of that play, and he had this huge smile, and he says, we run it, and Max has never thrown it to me. And then I asked somebody walking up the tunnel, I said, this is what Elijah said, and this person told me, technically he's an option, but not really. Like, technically he is, but you really got to go deep to get to the Elijah Spencer part of it, which I think speaks to how good he is, to Burnsy's point, at just going through and knowing where the answers are going to be. If this is covered and that's covered, here's my next one. And yeah, I think there was one throw maybe to Elijah Spencer where there were two Terrapins around him that just got broken up maybe in the first half. And even that, it wasn't like a super threatening defensive play. It just, I think Elijah might even had a play on the ball. He just doesn't put it in harm's way ever. And that's probably why PJ is fine with him throwing it however many times he's throwing it.
Well, I was laughing that we talked about in the preseason, Chip. Fleck came out and said, yes, 70% completion percentage. And we're all thinking to ourselves, in what world? There were only 5 teams, I believe, last year in all of college football that were doing it. Well, Max Brosmer, heading into the last 4 games of the season, is sitting at 69.5% completion, which will absolutely shatter the completion percentage record that Tanner set a couple years ago. He's, as much as he is a high-end processor, which we all know about, he's got to be one of the most accurate quarterbacks you've seen where the in a while.
Yeah, I think his two biggest strengths are or probably 3, his leadership, because everybody loves the guy, his accuracy, but then his ability to just understand what he's seeing. And you go back to 2019, in that offense, you're like, they threw the ball a lot, right? You felt like I was just looking it up while you guys were talking. They averaged 24 attempts per game that year.
Right. Max
is averaging 31. So he's attempting 7 more passes per game than that 2019 team. So they're really throwing the ball. I mean, this is radically different than that. I mean, 7 more passes attempts a game is a lot different. And so, but that speaks to his trust. And it's not just, check downs or short. I mean, we're seeing him throw the ball down the field more, I think, as this season goes on. And I'm glad Randy, my colleague Johnson, wrote about this. I really feel like you're seeing a coordinator and quarterback on the same page. And I thought Harbaugh, the game he called, he knew he had an inferior secondary. He knew they were young and not very good. Some of the concepts that he drew up, the one where Spencer was wide open in the
bunch
second half, bunch set. They couldn't have defended that any worse, but he knew that there might be some communication issues because they were dealing with some backups in there, I think. And so I think Harbaugh deserves a lot of credit too for.
Be careful when you say that, because it is one of the. Well, that's one of the things I haven't understood it. Now, last year the offense was incredibly inconsistent. I ain't going to be the one to tell you otherwise. Yeah. But it's always blame the coordinator. Even earlier in the year, it's Harbaugh hasn't been the issue. I'd argue Harbaugh has been pretty good. It's you look at over the course of 8 games this season, Chip, when the offense falters, it's because it's just execution
or drops.
It's dropped. It's missed assignments. I don't really think it's schemes or play calling. Like I remember back to 2022 with a previous offensive coordinator. And I remember asking people smarter than me, being like, what do you think? And they're like, what? I don't know what the plan is here with the scheme. I don't think the scheme has been the issue with Harbaugh. I think it's just been execution around him. And that's where last year the quarterback couldn't execute. And maybe some of that is on Harbaugh, but now certainly he went out and addressed it, goes and gets Brosmer from the portal. And I think he and Brosmer have a very good understanding of what each other are trying to do, and to what Randy wrote about and you know what a lot of us are saying, like Harbaugh, especially for the lowest paid offensive play caller in the Big Ten.
Here we go. Here comes salary pool bump, Burnsy.
Yeah, don't get me started about all that. Like Harbaugh called one of his best games, but I would also say I just think they executed it, specifically the quarterback, at a level that we haven't seen so far, which credit to them.
Well, the quarterback's putting them on the money, but I also think we always talk about nurture and develop the passing game. I still think a lot of their drop issues last couple of years are because the passing was so inconsistent and guys weren't in a rhythm catching the ball.
Could be.
And did they have any drops Saturday? Maybe I didn't.
Yeah, they had a few.
That. But it felt like guys are more reliable now in terms of catching the ball, and you're seeing. I mean, Daniel Jackson's just got some great hands. I mean, that guy makes some ridiculous catches. But Spencer, your guy Burns, he's really, I think, stepped up but even the Gears catch down the middle to set up the field goal. I mean, that's a hell of a catch.
I mean, Darius Taylor's now got 34 receptions, which is number 1 in the Big Ten, number 2 in college football.
I think you have to get your receivers in a rhythm as much as your quarterback in a rhythm, catching the ball. And I think they've done a good job. So but I mean, and this is not to dump on the previous quarterback, but how many times were guys twisting or bending down, or, you talk about a catch radius, they needed, the balls were just all over. Brosmer just puts it on the money where guys can either it's out of harm's way, or he puts it in position where guys can make a play after they catch the ball.
I'd also say, like, you look at Saturday's game specifically, 9 of 13 on third down. I mean, that's tremendous. Yeah. But I even go back to the first 3 third downs of the game. They were all third and longs.
Right.
And they were all converted. And, oh, by the way, to 3 different receivers. And that's where last year's offense was sitting around 30% on third down. This year, through 8 games, you're number 4 in the Big Ten at 47%. I just think so much of it comes down to the way Brosmer's playing and the way that Harbaugh continues to tweak the offense to what the skill sets of the players do. That's what we've been wanting the offensive coordinator to do, or anybody wants their offensive coordinator to do.
But you got to have the right quarterback.
And that's where Brosmer, they went out and identified him. I mean, we've seen so many transfer quarterbacks. Think about Florida State right now. How much would they want someone like Max Brosmer? Where would Michigan be if they would have gone out and got Max Brosmer? So as much as it is complimenting, I think, Harbaugh's play calling, I think you have to go back to December, January and say they knew it wasn't good enough at quarterback. It was Harbaugh, the one that wanted to go get Brosmer, and he was dead on the nuts there.
Well, and it's interesting, too, that, I mean, he put up ridiculous numbers at New Hampshire and all that, but for a coach to be able to see that at that level and feel like, this is going to translate to the Big Ten, and even though he's not facing the competition, whatever he saw, he had a belief and a confidence in that would work at this level. And so kudos to him for not saying, what's competition level? Guys are putting numbers against it. No, he saw that it was translatable, and they're being rewarded because of that.
Enjoy it, everybody. If you're a Gopher fan, enjoy it, because this is about as good as it's gotten in a really long time, where you just have complete confidence in a guy knowing what the hell he's doing on a week-by-week basis, and doing it really without a running game. And there's a transition. Years ago, it would be get up 21 points and in Big Ten West football style, run the ball 40 times, shrink the game, and end up winning 24-7, right? How many times have we seen that at Iowa, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Illinois, go down the list? And PJ tried to do that in the second quarter. Maryland did not allow that. Still, for the life of me, and Burnsy and I talked about this on Gopher Football Sunday, I'll never understand how late October, after watching however many games of Gopher tape, the takeaway for Mike Loxley and his staff going into Saturday's game was, we're not going to let them run the ball, which was a quote that came out of the head coach's mouth. Yeah. I don't understand how that happens, but that's what they hung their hat on certainly in the second quarter, when the Gophers did try to establish a running game. Didn't work. Darius obviously had the big run that gets the per carry yardage up there to a much more respectable number. After you take that out, I think it was about 2 yards a carry. But I'm kind of done, guys, beating my head against the wall or worrying about it, because I just think it kind of is what it is at this point, especially if teams somehow incredulously are loading up and run blitzing to stop the run. Yeah. I think the new run game is Darius Taylor and Marcus Major out of the backfield for 5 yards a clip, and that's what it's going to be. And I'm fine with that because they're moving the ball and they're putting up points.
Yeah, it's funny. I was checking the box scores. We were walking around Chicago, and I think they were up 28-0 and had -8 yards rushing, which is damn near impossible, and it's totally anti what we've seen from Gophers. But just so many hits in the backfield when they try to run. It's crazy. Lost, yardage. And, if the weather turns bad, are you still going to be able to throw it? That's the one fear that you have, that you're not able to run it if it's, a bad weather game and you have to. But I just think the identity's done a 180. I just think this is who they are. You never want to say just completely abandon the run, because Adrian Peterson used to say this about his running style: famine, famine, feast.
Mm-hmm.
Famine. That sort of feels what the Gophers' running game is now. A lot of famine, then Darius Taylor pops one, or maybe Major gets one, but it just feels like a lot of famine, feast to me.
Well, that's where you look at the stats at the end of the day, and that's where between Taylor, Marcus Major, and Jordan Newbin, they ran the ball 23 times for something like 4.5 yards per carry. It's pretty decent. We'll take that, especially in this offense. But then you take out the 51-yard run, which was well blocked by the offensive line. The other 95% of runs went for about 2 yards a carry. Maryland had 9 tackles for loss, and I'd imagine most of those were on the run plays. So for whatever reason, this offensive line struggles to execute consistently in the run game. But I will give them, as the kids would say, Chip, some flowers.
They're flowers.
In pass protection. For whatever reason, they are a much better pass protection line than run game execution line this year. Brosmer's only been sacked 4 times in this 3-game winning streak, was not sacked on Saturday. I will say there was some pressure around him, but Brosmer didn't have it immediately in his face, so he was able to navigate around it. I just think that if you go into the month of November now and you're Harbaugh and your offensive line coach, Brian Callahan, you have to continue to try the run game, but I'd be pulling the plug earlier and earlier. I'd be running it just enough to throw it, which is crazy to say about a Gopher offense from yesteryear going into what is a very crucial November for them. But I think we've seen the staff adapt more and more and more. And I fully believe, by the way, as Guardsy kind of led this off with, I think PJ got on the headset when they're up 21-0 there in that second quarter and went, "We're going to run the football." And Maryland said, "Okay, we're going to run blitz off the edge constantly."
Yeah.
And then it finally became, okay, we're going to try to pass it again. And they have success doing so. But the question is going to become, whether it's this weekend in Champaign, 2 weekends in Piscataway, whatever it may be, there is going to be a game in the next 4. I can about guarantee you they're up 4 in the fourth quarter, and they're going to need to run clock, and they're going to need to extend drives. So you'd hope at some point the running game finds something. It's just we're running out of time for that to be the case with this run game.
Anything else offensively you guys want to discuss before we take a break and come back and talk about the defense and everybody's favorite topic from Saturday, how long the starters played? Anything offensively we want to get into? Are we good there?
I think we're good.
All right, let's pause and talk about our great partner and our great friends, Jack's Cafe. JAXcafe.com is the website. Holiday dining right around the corner. If you want to hang out with some buddies the night before Thanksgiving, Jack's would be a great option there. They've got brunch, as always. Maybe a few more weeks, you're going to be able to hit that patio, which is tremendous, as Burnsy would say. But whether you've got a party of 15 or 400, they've got something for you at Jack's Cafe. Make your reservations, Burnsy, at JAXcafe.com.
I was just on social media over the weekend, and my wife showed me Jack's Cafe is getting some steam for one of the best patios with the youths among the TikTok and Instagram crowd. I'm like, finally, people younger than me are starting to figure out if we want to go get a nice brunch in Northeast Minneapolis, that's where you got to go with one of the most beautiful patios you'll see. It's going to be in the 50s, 60s here again this weekend. So if you're trying to earn some brownie points after what I assume is either a pumpkin patch, a petting zoo, whatever it may be, apple picking with the missus, that's where I would go. Jack's Cafe, Chip.
So it's kids with the TikTok, and then it's 53-year-old Chip Scoggins with the readers and the paper menu. They can service
that's right.
anybody. That's what we've said.
Versatility,
Jack's Cafe
baby,
is good for everybody, right, Chip?
Yes, and I'm going to have to take a rain check tonight. I was going to go, but I don't want to get anyone there sick. And you want to be able to enjoy yourself, right? You don't want to be under the weather either. But how about my friend George Yoshida from Woodbury sent us a thing. Him and his wife there went for their anniversary dinner. took a selfie from the parking lot, which I loved. Keep doing it. Keep sending us those pictures. Appreciate George doing that. Appreciate all our listeners that are taking our advice. And I know George and other people have been there many times, but this might just, say, hey, let's go back again after listening to those guys talk about how great Jax is.
Yeah, I always tell Bill that the Pair and a Spare podcast told you to stop by. And basically, the Pair and a Spare audience has Gopher football season tickets because Bill always says, hey, let's give these away. Let's get some Pair and a Spare podcast listeners in my seats. They're tremendous. And we always appreciate people that go to the game, especially if they bring their kid, maybe a first experience like we just had over the weekend. Take a picture, tag us. We love to be involved in all that. It's a lot of fun, and we appreciate Jack's Cafe taking care of all of you so well. So as I always say, support those who support all of us. Go to jackscafe.com. Chip, Burnsy was very bitter about the defensive effort. I couldn't believe what I was reading. They make the best quarterback in the Big Ten statistically look like, go down the list of quarterbacks that we've seen. I'm not going to name any names or throw any shade, as the kids would say, but all I read all week was how good this quarterback from Maryland was. Billy Edwards Jr., I believe his name is. He leads the Big Ten in completions and attempts and yardage. He's got 2 great wide receivers. And the next thing I know, he's got 2 interceptions, both dreadful. He wanted nothing to do with anything for a while. And I read Burnsy's 5 takeaways at GopherIllustrated.com, and it's like, if it were up to him, PJ never would have taken the starters out. He would have made them just keep going and going and going. So, Burnsy, what gives? Why were you so bitter?
Wow.
Other teams are allowed to score. Other teams are allowed to put together drives, Ryan Burns.
They certainly are. I'd tell you this much, and I've talked about it on Gopher Illustrated or Gopher Good on Radio, and maybe you guys can help me try to get my mind around it. I'm having a hard time in determining what quote-unquote success looks like for Corey Heatherman's defensive style versus Joe Rossi's defensive style, where Joe Rossi's was very, I shouldn't say vanilla because there was complexities within it, but it was very bend, don't break, Tracy Clays-esque. And that's where Corey Heatherman's style is the complete opposite. It's helter-skelter.
He's like the middle child, Chip.
Yeah,
like,
he is. He's
the last two.
You never know what you're going to get, but
the older child, but the middle child is Corey Heatherman. It's just a Tasmanian devil of good and bad. But I got to say, mostly good here for the most part recently.
Turnovers.
They lead the Big Ten in takeaways. I think they're second nationally in interceptions after a couple more this weekend. It's just so up or down. It's very roller coaster-esque. It's either there's going to be, like in the fourth quarter, 12 yards per play against the backup, even when you have the starters in.
Who cares?
Or this is going to be a takeaway. It's just very boom or bust. And again, I wasn't as dramatic as some of us want to. In the Minnetonka.
Well, let the readers decide. GopherIllustrated.com. You can read the 5 takeaways.
I would just say and I got to change my best with a neck-time mentality with this, as some would say. Just knowing what success looks like in such a helter-skelter style is going to lead to more swings. And Chip, that's what maybe I'm having a little bit of time struggling.
Well, let me say this. I'll preface this. I did not watch the fourth quarter. I don't care about garbage time.
Sure.
Defenses give up a lot of yards and points in garbage time. The game was over. I'm sorry. So I thought, and I didn't read anything anybody wrote, I was impressed with the defense. I thought Ja Joyner was outstanding. I thought Cody Lindenberg was outstanding. They continued to create takeaways. I thought they really ran to the ball and tackled. Or every time there was a Maryland guy, you felt like 5 Gophers were coming in there to hit him.
Right.
I don't care about garbage time. I mean, I'm not going to, and so people were mad because they left the starters in there. I'm not going to.
We'll talk about what TJ said about it, but
I just when it's garbage time, I think it can skew how we think about things. Defense is relaxed. We see it all the time. I thought when the game was competitive, or when the game was in the first half, I really thought their defensive line, particularly Ja Joyner, was disruptive, and Anthony Smith caused the Perich turnover, I think. Yep. He pushed that guard right back into the quarterback. I just thought they impacted that quarterback and made him, even when he didn't have pressure, it looked like he felt the pressure coming and was just kind of wilder than he had been previously. So I don't know what happened in the fourth quarter. Maybe that altered perceptions, but I thought for the first half when the game was competitive or interesting, I thought the defense was good.
Well, that's where stats can tell whatever story you want it to, and that's where no sacks, 2 tackles for loss. You would think, boy, it must have been a rough day. And then you look
it's like John Joyner against USC.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, and that's where then you look at like the Pro Football Focus stuff. Okay, no sacks, but they had 23 pressures, 15 hurries, 8 quarterback hits. And from the moment that Billy Edwards stepped onto the field, he's had pressure in his face. He's getting battered around. He could never find himself to be comfortable, which for 90% of college quarterbacks, if you can hit them early, they're going to be off their game. They're not going to be consistent. They're going to make some errant throws, and that's where this defensive line was able to do so. I'd also say, as much as talk as Ethan Robinson has gotten this season, Justin Wally has finally taken that step forward. We thought he was going to take it last year, and he didn't. This year, I believe he is second in all of college football in passes broken up. You saw him instinctually make the play on the pick six with the miscommunication there. I think Justin Wally has finally taken that step forward, and they're going to need him, especially this weekend against a couple of more talented receivers. But Justin Wally has elevated his game to what we wanted to see. Like when he took, this team kind of by storm as a true freshman back in the day, you were always thinking to yourself, what could he look like by the time he leaves? Well, he's playing at a really high level right now, and I hope that it continues for these next 4 games, because if so, I mean, we're going to be talking about probably an NFL future for him in terms of draft picks.
Yeah, he was. I mean, I thought he was great. I don't know how the grades graded out Burnsy, but I thought Lindenberg brought a physicalness that
he was the top graded guy on Pro Football Focus, and now he has been in back-to-back weeks. And Chipper, turns out, when he doesn't have a gigantic arm brace on, and maybe he's the healthiest that he's been.
Yeah,
it's for whatever sport that it may be, whether it's baseball with a guy playing through something, or now even in football, when he's healthy, turns out 45 is pretty dang good, eh?
Yeah, that's the Cody Lindbergh that I think we've all been waiting to see. I just thought, just watching it from a TV copy, I thought he was everywhere, and I just thought he brought that physical style that you've been wanting to see from him.
So you're really that bothered about the 12 yards of play against the second stringers in the fourth quarter, Burnsy? You've brought it up like 19 times.
As much as I'm upset about kind of the way that it went, I don't understand why PJ left him in the game.
Well, because he got annoyed. He was like you. He got totally sideways. I talked about it on the radio. He had Cody, speaking of Lindenberg, grab the whole defense and basically say, we got to finish. He's trying to do the culture message stuff, which I get, which I understand. But this wasn't Illinois last year. Sorry, it just wasn't.
Yeah, he kept mentioning that, and I'm thinking to myself, that was like a 10-point game last year. You were up 30-something points in the fourth quarter. Why are we thinking about Illinois in that?
Not Northwestern a year ago. It was more.
They were still up in the teens, but this game, you're up 30 in the fourth quarter. There is no comparison in teens versus up 30. That's where Aiden Goosby's getting hurt. Josh Joyner gets dinged up.
I know.
And then they call the timeout, and then he finally pulls him. I thought that whole I'm telling you, I was looking at Greeter there, and we were both going, why are they still in?
Yeah.
Their heart's clearly not in it, which, to Chip's point, I don't blame him. It's garbage time. You're up 28 points. In what world is the risk worth the reward there? I still don't understand that.
Yeah, no, it was that he reverted because a few months ago, he played a lot of guys, remember, early on. He played Drake Lindsey a bunch. He played a lot of defensive guys, and they mixed in a couple of backups defensively before they took everybody out. But it was obvious that drive that you were talking about really bothered him because I don't think he felt they had the right intensity. But also, like, you're dealing with a lot of these guys have been around a while. So it's not like you really need to send the message there. Again, it's his team. He can do what he wants to do, but I think they played with fire there for sure. But it definitely was a mentality thing of, we just let them march down the field and that can't happen. But it's also like, yeah, but you boat raced them all day and you've played great. Like, it's okay. I get it. You're fighting against human nature. Coaches can never let their guard down, but I would have found a different way to do it there because a couple of important players got dinged up and they did not need to. But I thought to start this whole thing at the beginning, I mean, the defense helped them put the game away in the first half. I mean, the defense played forcing the turnovers and obviously scoring on defense and really set the tone on that 4th and 1 to stop it right away. That really set everything in a positive direction for the Gophers, and I just thought they played really well.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that first quarter and those plays. It's all guys that were banged up that were making those plays. You look at the 4th down stop, it's Maverick Baranowski returning. He's the one that takes the guards away, which allows Kerry Brown, who returns, to make the stop. On that second drive, it gets backed up because Jalen Logan Redding, who had been banged up, hadn't been playing a lot. He forces a hold, puts Maryland back. It turns out when they get healthy, they're actually a pretty decent team, which, by the way, is why I was so upset about Fleck League because they're so thin at so many spots. Like, if Cody Lindenberg would have gotten seriously hurt there, linebacker would not be great, or Devin Eastern or Jalen Logan. They're very top heavy defensively, which is part of why I didn't understand it, that they were keeping him in. But yes, it was getting healthy there. And for as much as we talk about Koi Perich, by the way, that young safety core of Kerry Brown and Aiden Gooseby and Perich is going to be something to really.
There's some dudes.
Yeah.
All underclassmen.
Yeah. And that was the other thing. As much as their line played well, I thought the safeties came up and really, Koi had a tackle for loss. Kerry Brown had 2 4th down stops, right? Those guys played really well. And when they're marrying rush and coverage, and you hear it all the time. When you get that rush, you're going to have some opportunities to make some plays on the back end. And they still lead college football in interception. I think they probably do after that. I mean, and their pass defense has, been highly ranked. It's because they're getting pressure. And you talked about Corey Heatherman's style. It is frenetic. And yes, you may give up some plays, but if it's a risk reward and your reward is getting some takeaways and turnovers, man, I'd take that.
Hey, Burnsy, is Koi Perich in line for all Big Ten at this point? And he's got to be, right?
It'd be tough to, he now leads the Big Ten. He's number one with interceptions. And the crazy part is, and I can look it up while you talk, I think he's probably only played 200 defensive snaps this season.
Right.
Like that.
It's really only been the last 3 or 4 weeks, right?
He's played 181 defensive snaps.
And you know how these things, we vote on these things because there's 18 teams now. Well, stats and what you see. And if you're watching Big Ten final drive, every week you've seen Koi Perich like either end a game or change a game. And his return the other day, he catches it and immediately spins out. I mean, that if one of the three of us catch that ball, we're getting tackled at the spot. And most Division I safeties are probably getting tackled.
The birthday boy is more athletic than you give him credit for. You should have seen him navigating the streets of Chicago this week.
I believe that. I definitely believe that. But the fact that he turned that into like a 40-plus yard return, and it just it doesn't even phase you at this point. Like people see that, the people that vote on these, and I'm sure the coaches see it too. So he's going to be, I don't know. I mean, we'll have to look and see who the other safeties are, but he's got to be in the mix at this point. If he just even if the season stopped today and he ended with 5 picks, I would imagine he's going to be in that position, which is pretty crazy, man. Pretty heady stuff. But I think it's all earned.
Yeah. You could put Koi Perich on that list. I'd put Ja Joyner, Justin Wally, Cody Lindenberg, but yeah, the way he's been able to come in, and again, even with that interception he had on Saturday, he owes, to Chip's point, Anthony Smith a lot of credit there because he gets the guard knocked back into him and he just happens to be waiting there. But right spot, right time. How many times have we said that over the years with guys like Antoine Winfield or Tyler Newman? They just know where to be, and then they know how to attack the ball and make a play on the ball.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, to Guardy's point, not only is he in the right spot, but to have the mindset, I'm going to do something with this. Right. And, you're right. He was spinning as his feet hit the ground. He's already pirouetting to get out of that tackle, and he's looking upfield and figuring out his blockers. And anytime, whether it's a punt return or interception, he's thinking end zone. He's trying to figure out the way to get there. And that's just there's just some guys just have that playmaking instinct, that knack for, and I think he did that in high school and he's doing it now, and he's going to score this year. There's no doubt in my mind, either punt return or interception return. He's going to, or Burns, did I see this right? He played 1 snap on offense. Maybe one's coming there.
He did. And that was, it's the first play after the interception, actually, is they went to a 2-back look with Darius Taylor and Koi Perich there. So he has now played.
What was the play? What happened?
They ended up going, I think he and Darius both went out,
split out
in pass routes, and
but
they're setting up for something maybe, or at least at the very least with that kind of stuff. And the amount of questions, by the way, I've also gotten this week since that play of, well, what will happen next year when Drake Lindsay and Koi Perich are on the field at the same time? Will they have to announce their numbers? I love that everybody is now already 11 months ahead of time.
Yeah, we love the future
there.
And we need to keep our feet where they are.
That's what I was like. I got to get to November. I got to get through portal season. And I'm not saying there's anything with either one of those two guys, but it's like, well, who's going to change their number? Guys, I love the enthusiasm, or gals. I love the enthusiasm of what you're trying to already pontificate on, to steal one of Guardsy's guys' words there.
Yeah.
His vernacular. But again, one snap. We'll see if they end up coming back to it. But yes, now you can say Koi Perich has played offense, defense, and special teams.
Well, first of all, sorry, Drake Lindsay. It's going to have to be you changing the number because Koi Perich has already sold like thousands of Koi Perich number 3 jerseys. So it's going to have to be Drake Lindsay. So that's going to be an uncomfortable conversation. And this shows you what a terrible sideline reporter I am. I didn't realize he was out there.
Yeah, I didn't realize it live either.
No, nobody did. But but he walked by me after that play. And I'm like, what was he
now
doing?
It's on you, actually.
Yeah, because I'm like, did he get hurt? Did he have to run up into the tunnel? Did he go to the bathroom after that? I don't know, because I wasn't thinking. And I don't know what I was doing after the interception, if I was going to check something else. But he kind of walked by me, and he was just kind of walking a little slow. And I'm like, well, that's weird. He wasn't in the tent. Was he just talking to somebody down there? Because Koi will do that, too. He was talking to some, like, 6-year-olds behind Section 141 at one point during the game that just wanted to say hi to him. But I do want to give some people some peace of mind because everybody's always worried. I don't think we were worried as much about Koi leaving as we were Darius a year ago. Burnsy, your message board might go someplace different. But when I left the stadium, and by the way, because it was such a boat race, leaving Huntington Bank was such a dream on Saturday because everybody was already gone. Students were gone at halftime. Everybody else went to, I don't know if they went to the Wolves game later that night and they wanted to make sure they got to Target Center. So there wasn't that usual University Avenue or 4th Street traffic. And I walked around to get to my car and I saw a pack of I want to say 30 people, most of them wearing number 3 Perich jerseys that were just hanging out. And then Koi was obviously there. It was just, basically the whole town of Esco, including the Bad Moms, which we're learning about. That's the vibe. That's the bit. That's why you come here. That's why Koi's here, I think, in a big city. So that I don't worry about it as much because they aren't all going to Columbus. They're not all going to Eugene. That's something that you can't put a price on, in my opinion, and I do think that matters to them.
I think
anyway.
And just on that point too, and maybe I'm wrong on this. I think it's different for outstate kids.
Yeah.
Like Isaac Osama.
100% is. 100%.
This is going away for school.
Yes, for sure.
Whereas kids in the cities might say, I really want to go away to school. I mean, for them, this is going away from school and having their parents be able to drive 2 hours down 35 to get to a game versus, having to make a couple connections and all that. I think that matters. I think for those, having visited both those families, I think, there's a lot of family members that are in both their families, both Koi's and Isaac's, that went to all their high school games, and it's a big thing. The support network. So having all those people be able to come, but I just think for outstate kids, maybe it's different than what kids in the metro feel.
Or you even heard Koi this morning with PA on what was the station that PA has a show on, Guards?
That's KFAN FM 100.3, also available everywhere you want to listen on the free iHeartRadio app, and we do podcasts. I don't know if people understand, we do podcasts like it's some new invention 10 years ago. We've been doing podcasts since 2006, in case anybody wanted to know. But yeah, that's KFAN, home of the Gophers. So big Gopher Day on the Fan. Dragan Kesich was with the morning show. Koi was with PA. PJ made his weekly appearance. So I'm sure your message boards will appreciate that, Burnsy. I'm sure there'll be a nice glowing KFAN post right there. Not that I'm bitter about it, but go ahead.
What's more bitter, you right now or the IPAs that you and Chip will be sipping on here in the evenings this week?
Me.
Yeah.
Me.
But even as
Koi, there's a backstory there that I don't know, but go ahead.
Yeah. But with Koi, I mean, he even talked about with PA this morning, just the ability to come to Minnesota, which I think is going away. But he talked about how Minnesota is the safety U for him. He's seen what Newbin and Winfield have been drafted, Jordan Howard have been drafted. That was pushed to him quite a bit. Or even the opportunities that he's now able to get with being a Minnesota guy. I think they revealed this morning that he's going to have something with Gushers coming out, just like with what Mo Ibrahim had. And again, I really don't worry about him. And I understand that you, me, and Chip are all going to get the tweets and the emails about, Darius leaving, Koi leaving. Well, I'd also say, Guardsy, Dinky Town Athletes announced $1 million match campaign.
What a transition, Ryan.
I would say we've all heard, how come none of these local companies step up? Well, you finally get a local company to put their money where their mouth is. They get $1 million match. I mean, that's the biggest we've seen. So if fans are thinking to themselves, well, does my $5, $50, whatever you can give, going to go somewhere? If you want to show the other big local companies that they should pair up with the Gophers, this has to go as a success. And I know that from talking with Derek Burns here just yesterday, every little dollar counts, Guardsy.
Yeah, I'm glad you put that in. I was gonna as well. That I've talked about pausing and appreciating the moment with Brosmer. I think we need to, people need to understand this is a big deal for Dinky Town athletes as they've kind of, gone along and probably slower than some coaches would like, right? Every coach wants to go 1,000,000 miles an hour and the rules are always changing. And as we all know, the University of Minnesota goes at its own speed sometimes. Thank you, Clem Haskins, for all of that, going back to 1997. So, but this is a huge deal. This to me is a massive, massive deal. Credit to Nepsis for jumping in. Credit to Derek and Robert and everybody there. And now you have an opportunity just to, literally double whatever donation you want to make. And I get it. It feels weird in 2024 to say we're responsible for this as college football fans, but that ain't changing, at least for now. It's not slowing down. And this is a great get and a great investment by this Bloomington-based company with a Gopher grad that started it. And I think we need to give credit where credit's due here and try to pump this thing up, because this is a big deal. We saw how NIL helped them the last couple of years, including with your starting quarterback, including with Darius Taylor, including with the defensive guys that they brought in. It does matter. And to get, be competitive, not just, writing huge checks and, outbidding people, but getting in the ballpark. That's what we've always talked about with Minnesota, whether it's facilities or salary pools, Burnsy, which you're always obsessed with. But I understand why. Like, you need to be competitive. You don't have to be the biggest. You don't have to be the best, but you do have to be in the ballpark. And I think Dinky Town Athletes has done a good job of getting in the ballpark. And now they're trying to, grow the ballpark, make it a little bit bigger even for them. So I think this is just a huge deal all around.
Well, if you start with the premise, there's never enough, right? For anyone. I don't care if you're Alabama, whoever, there's never enough. But this goes along to me of changing narratives, much like changing the narratives about the Gophers don't travel. Well, when NIL came along, which has changed, when NIL came along, all we heard, and you guys heard it too, I heard it's never going to be able to compete because they don't have the NIL. That's just blatantly wrong. I mean, it's just factually wrong. Now, they had to make up some ground, and Robert and Derek did yeoman's work to get Dinky Town Athletes to the place it is now, where they are competitive, and they were able to keep Darius and all the guys they kept last offseason. And I can't imagine the work they're doing to get Koi different sponsorships and this $1 million match with this company. The narrative's changed. I mean, this is not, again, there's never enough, and you're never in a good spot. You always got to keep pushing to get more, but this is not the albatross that the narrative, the perception is with Gophers or others. I mean, they're competitive with other teams, and they're doing good work on behalf of their athletes.
Are they ever going to be Ohio State, whose athletic director comes out and says $20 million is what we're spending in NIL? No, absolutely not. But you don't have to be. And yeah, and as PJ loves to say, comparisons steal your joy in that aspect. But the way that they have built this thing from the ground up, and from what I understand, they're up year over year, even with some of the struggles in September. They've now capitalized, I think, on this 3-game winning streak, and we'll see what happens here in the month of November. But they have a lot of needs to address in the portal in the offseason. I mean, you got to go out and get a couple of receivers without Daniel Jackson and Elijah Spencer next year. You lose 3 starters on the offensive line. You lose both of your defensive ends. You lose both of your corners. And let me tell you, as someone who lives, breathes, and sleeps recruiting in the portal every day of their life, that costs a little bit of money. And every little bit helps. I think that's what Derek Burns talked about with me last night on Go for Gridiron Radio is, if you've been looking for an opportunity to get the most bang for your buck, whether it's $1, $5, whatever you can give, showing that Nepsis in this $1 million match goes well also just goes a long way for Dinky Town athletes to then go to whatever XYZ local company and say, look at the success that we had here, team up with us. So we'll see how it goes, but it's a great job, I think, by the folks at DTA to be able to get that done. Biggest match campaign they've ever had.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. And so we're trying to highlight it on any way that we possibly can. Anything else Gopher related we want to get to? Anything Big Ten related real quick that we want to get to that we saw over the weekend that piqued our interest? Illinois, the opponent this weekend, we should probably spend a minute or two on them. I was stunned. I guess I need to stay up and watch Oregon play more. I know I watched them against Ohio State, but I thought the 20-ish point spread was a little ridiculous just because of the respect I have for Bielema and Illinois. I was wrong. That didn't appear to be very close out there in the Pacific Northwest.
I watched a little of that at a sports bar. And they have some speed, Oregon. And they're just relentless. They just keep coming at you. And Illinois made a couple of mistakes, and next thing you know, boom, game's out of control. I mean, they're just they're speed,
a well-oiled machine. They're a legitimate number one team in the country. There are some teams, I think, in the top 5 that I think you can poke holes in. I don't think you can poke a hole in Oregon right now, which is why they were up 35-3. I also think on the flip side, that's 2 very emotional type of games that Illinois was coming off of. You can say what you will about Purdue, but the way that Purdue stormed back to then force overtime, I mean, that's a crazy emotional game. And then they're able to beat Michigan wearing those uniforms, the 100-yard bit. And then you got to travel out on the West Coast to go play the number 1 team in the country. Yeah. I don't always look. I'm the king and captain of the narrative street, and I get my episode next week, and I can't wait. But I do think when you're talking about teenagers or just people in their early 20s, that stuff matters. Yeah, that big emotional letdown, having to go all the way out, and then you get boat raced in the first half. They are injured now, a little bit, and the nice part is Brett Bielema gives updates throughout the week about injuries, so we'll be able to keep an eye on that. But we talked about last week as a coin flip game. This is another coin flip game. The spread reflects. So Illinois opened, I believe, as a 2-point favorite. Now it's swung to Minnesota to 2. You look at the advanced stats, anywhere between 40 and 60% wherever you're going. But Chip, you know, like I do, Brett Bielema has the Gophers number, forever. He is 10-0. And I know that Fleck talked about it after the game too, Guardsy. He hasn't forgotten the way that they lost in dramatic fashion last year to that Illinois team.
Yeah.
If there was ever a time to get off the schneid, this would be the time when you're on a three-game heater.
Yeah, because there have been Gopher teams seasons where I felt like they were the superior team, and Bielema just found a way to either there or here came in and win. I mean, obviously
his first year was the most egregious, and it was 14-6, and that was a bad team, and that was not good. But go ahead, Chip.
Yeah, but so there have been years where you just felt like Gophers were the better team and found a way to lose it, or Bielema found a way to win it, however you want to look at it. So, this is, I would think, the way they're playing with the confidence and, with 3 wins in a row and the quarterback playing the way he is, you should go in there confident, but you have to find, until you do it, you have to find a way to beat a Bielema team.
That's where I felt like the last couple of years, maybe, again, there's not a coaching staff, I think, that has more respect for me that isn't within the upper echelon of the pay scale more than Illinois. I think they maximize the most of the talent they always have, especially with Bielema. And I think you've seen that come to fruition, whether to your point in that 2021 game where I don't think they had any business beating Minnesota with that roster. I think they just out-schemed and executed them. And then even down the stretch in that final drive, they shouldn't have won that game. And so it comes out to Heatherman and Harbaugh need to have really good game plans going in, because we even saw it, I think, in 2022, Guardsy and Champaign. They came out flying in that one, from what I remember. And Chase Brown was incredible, which is why he's scoring touchdowns in the NFL now. But this is not a gimme. I know that Illinois is coming off a boat race, but if we've learned anything over our time, do not sleep on Brett Bielema teams. There's a reason they're ranked still the number 24 team in the country.
Right.
Yeah.
So the money is swung to the Gophers, is what you're telling me, Burnsy.
It went from Illinois -2 to now Minnesota -2. Again, I think some of that's injury related, and we'll get more clarity from Bielema throughout the week. But this is going to be a very good game between a 6-2 ranked Illinois team and a 5-3.
This is a nice win. Well, and the Gophers are in the top half of the Big Ten right now, and people might go, "Oh, that's great." It's like, look around in the Big Ten. There's 50 teams. Like, top half is good. Like, top half and to stay there, they're going to have to keep winning because there's been this glut of teams that have been 4-3, 3-4. What did you say last week, Burnsy? Wasn't it like 9 or 10 teams that were 4-3 and 3-4? Like,
correct.
Yeah.
We always talk about the margin for error in college sports. It's only getting smaller with NIL and the transfer portal. It is as much as we've seen, even at the top end, a week-to-week proposition, and you just got to keep stacking them up and see where you go. But this is one, as you looked at the beginning of the season, coin flip game for sure, but also one it's like I wouldn't have picked the Gophers to win this game in the preseason. I just, if I was going down the list, now we've seen a couple earlier games I wouldn't have that maybe they probably should have. Like, they probably should have beaten Michigan, right? If they don't gift them 14 points, maybe they do. But this is a huge game. This is a huge game, not just for the Bielema narrative, but just to keep the vibes going on how you're feeling. Then you go to Rutgers, who's not playing well. I'm guessing they're going to be favored in that game. So you've got an opportunity here to really put a good stamp on this season. After a month ago, people were kind of wondering which way was this thing going to go.
Mm-hmm. You have an opportunity to be 4-0 in your next 4. You have an opportunity to be 0-4. Like, I understand that Fleck doesn't believe in momentum, and they're 3-0 in their last 3. They could have easily lost at least the USC and the UCLA game.
Mm-hmm.
They got off to a quick start and put Maryland away early. But every one of these games coming up, because I'm not the biggest Penn State guy in the world, I understand that even with a backup quarterback in Madison, down 10-7 at halftime, they were able to show it. Now, Penn State is going to be on their 5th consecutive game once they play the Gophers, who they get a bye week to prepare. But you are liable to lose any of these games. You're also liable to win any of them. It's whatever team shows up. If the Maryland version that we saw of the Gophers last week shows up for the next 4 weeks, there's going to be a lot of excited Gopher fans at the end of the season, and I get it. But if the one that shows up against North Carolina or Iowa shows up, there's going to be another 0-4 in November like we saw last year. So that's the beauty of this college sports thing, Guards.
Tune in, baby.
Any given Saturday. And this
Gopher
team is an accurate representation of that.
Let's spin around here quickly with just a couple of things from the Big Ten and the border schools, because we got a lot of people that listen from the border schools that are here in Minneapolis. Iowa puts the backup quarterback in, Brendan Sullivan, and my favorite play is he passed it to somebody in the flat. I don't remember who it was, and then sprinted upfield in Brett Favre-like fashion to block for him. You think he was ready for his moment? You think he was ready to play after sitting behind Cade McNamara, former Northwestern quarterback? Fitz's kid is a preferred walk-on, Burnsy tells me, commit for next year. So Pat Fitzgerald was in the tunnel. Nice moment between the Fitzgerald family and Sullivan. But it'll be interesting to see what they do, because as we've talked about, Kirk Ferentz is loath to make a change. He's glacial speed sometimes, and probably to a fault. But Sullivan came in and sparked these guys pretty well, Burnsy.
We're talking about an Iowa offense that has scored 40 points in 2 of their last 3 games.
And you know who I saw at the elevator bank on Saturday?
Oh, boy.
As I was walking out back on the field, one of the quality control analysts for the Maryland Terrapins was getting on the elevator to go back up in the press box, Brian Ferentz.
Oh, boy.
He missed the first elevator. There was a little bit of a mad scramble. The Maryland coaches got separated, and so I walked right out, and I'm like, how do I know? It's Brian Ferentz. Hey, I kind of wanted to talk to him and say, I don't think it was all your fault, Brian. I defended you on the Parent of Spare podcast. Randy Byrne from Sports Byline upstairs, he trashed you, but I defended you. Anyway, they're moving the ball and scoring points.
Well, they got an opportunity to go 9-3 here. You look at their November schedule. They're home this weekend against Wisconsin, on the road against UCLA, on the road against Maryland, and they face Nebraska.
Yep.
That's another team where that's the beauty of the Big Ten now. Outside of like the top 4 teams who are all going to be in college football playoff discussion, teams 5 through 18, any given Saturday wouldn't shock me at all. So that's the beauty of it. But that offensive line continues to hum. Caleb Johnson is going to be cashing NFL checks here very, very soon. But they've got an opportunity, Tim Lester does, to build something around Brendan Sullivan here now that he's made the switch. Because Brendan Sullivan could come is, I believe, 2025 eligibility.
Right.
So let's see if Tim Lester and, more importantly, Kirk Ferentz stick to this switch, Chip.
I would. Just watching Cade McNamara, I didn't see it. I don't know what the fascination was, and I know he got injured last year, and you wanted to see if
right.
Give him a fair chance to it. But when you watch him, it didn't. I would have made the change probably. And I know Kirk, you have to manage your locker room and personalities, and you're loyal and all that. But I would be stunned if they went back, right?
Yes,
because you know what you're getting. I mean, I think you have to roll with Sullivan and see if that spark continues. Obviously, you have a dynamic tailback. I just think,
right.
As we saw here, he's a difference maker. But I was never really high on McNamara to begin with.
No, and it sets the table nicely for Sullivan to get some more run. Burns, you mentioned he's 2025 eligible. He can go right into the Pat Fitzgerald era of Iowa football next year when Kirk Ferentz steps down and Fitz takes over the program he loved beating more than anybody because they ended his college career.
You and Luke Buer with this conspiracy theory.
That's why I went with it.
Yeah.
Not the most outrageous thing I've ever heard, by the way.
No.
Not the most outrageous thing I've ever heard. So I'm going to need to be proven wrong.
All right, we'll find out.
I'm going to need to be proven wrong on that. So we'll see. Wisconsin hung for a half, and I looked up at the scoreboard. I don't remember when. I go, okay, great. Here it is. Camp Randall magic. It's going to happen. I'm going to have to hear it from my Wisconsin relatives. Jump around's going to get played all over the place. And Penn State, like they've done a couple of times this year, right, have played really good second halves and essentially ended that game pretty quickly. I think they had a pick six in the mix as well. And even with the backup quarterback, went into Camp Randall and got the victory. And Wisconsin continues to search for kind of a signature moment of their season.
Yeah, backup quarterback went in there. I saw a little bit of that second half. Penn State's good defensively. They were a lot.
They
more
got one
physical.
of the best front sevens in the Big Ten.
Yeah, their front just overwhelmed the Badgers. I mean, they couldn't do anything. I thought Penn State's defense really stood out. Obviously, I don't know what the situation was at quarterback with them and how long that's going to be, but their defense basically dictated that game. The second half.
Wisconsin's fascinating because they were white hot coming in. They were playing well defensively in that first half against Drew Aller. He gets knocked out. The backup goes in. So I don't know if the change just threw him off their game, but you allow 21 points in the second half. Braden Locke makes a horrible decision. It's a pick six.
Right.
Yeah.
Inconsistent quarterback play there. From talking with some people in Wisconsin, it seems like the vibe I'm getting from them is, when is that signature Luke Fickell win coming?
Right.
Because they can beat up on the lower class of the Big Ten, and that's what they had done coming into this game. But I think it's a huge game for Fickell this weekend against Kirk Ferentz. I think both fan bases, they obviously don't like each other, but I think Fickell needs this game pretty
Night
big.
game at Kinnick, by the way, pack a lunch.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be a difficult game for them, but Braden Locke to me is, I know it was the 1A, 1B thing, and he's looked pretty decent against the lower class, but then he steps up in competition. And from talking with your Sunday morning producer, Guardsy, I mean, he was as down in the dumps as you could possibly be about a guy like that. He was trying to talk up Alex Hornibrook to me, which I said, please.
Yeah.
You went through the line of quarterbacks from John Stocco to Alex Hornibrook to Scott Tolzien.
Yep.
It's amazing. My Wisconsin quarterback knowledge is way deeper than I even remembered.
I know.
And that doesn't even count Russell Wilson.
And that's why to bring it back to the Gophers, and this is not anything stop the news. Quarterback play. I mean, you look
Gophers
at
have a better quarterback than most of the teams are going to be playing here the rest of the way.
Yeah, you look at Iowa and Wisconsin, and so much of what's going on there starts at quarterback and their struggles and their inability to have any consistency or get that signature win. The Gophers go out and they pick the right quarterback, and all of a sudden, they beat USC. They won 3 in a row. They're impressive the way they're throwing a game. It's so much. I mean, it's not, again, it's not anything, no great mystery, but finding the right guy to lead your program solves a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's even for Wisconsin now. That's where everybody, last week it was, does Wisconsin potentially have a shot to go, 10-2, 9-3? Now everybody's is Wisconsin going to get to 6? Because
they're
not with that schedule. Their schedule is brutal.
On the road this weekend in Kinnick. Then they have to host Oregon at home off a bye week. And then they have to travel to Nebraska before they play Minnesota on a short week. That's That's why I would just always say, you got to take it week by week on this thing. I know you, me, and Chip, we all try to prognosticate win totals and yada yada.
Not me. I'm not crazy.
Yeah, it's just every single week is so different with these teams. It's just 18 to 23-year-olds, man. You never know what you're going to get. And that's where even with this Gopher team, they're 5-3 right now. They could be 5-7. They could be 9-3. We're going to find out. But that's where you just got to take it week by week with this thing.
Lastly, real quick here, because we did this, we actually had a group chat. We actually said we need to prepare something for the podcast. We've gone over an hour, but I do want to get to this. And we just ended with Wisconsin and Penn State. James Franklin in his press conference after the game at Camp Randall apologized for his behavior on Wednesday with the Penn State media for really just shrinking in the moment that didn't need to be that big or even that controversial. But to catch people up, a couple former Nittany Lions players were charged with rape from something that happened this past summer. I don't need to give you all the details on it. Jameel Lyons is 19, Kavion Keys is 19, both charged with felony rape. And that all went down this past week. It happened on Wednesday. And college coaches don't like to talk about controversial things like this, especially when it involves people that were affiliated with the program. But unfortunately, you're not coaching at Esco High School. You're coaching at Penn State, a pretty big spot. That with that comes big responsibility. And people have probably seen the video, but they tried to come out first with a university spokesperson and read a statement. James Franklin was like hiding somewhere. I don't know where he was hiding.
Right behind the backdrop.
Behind the backdrop. And they basically said, we're going to keep all questions to football, which is not how this works. And we don't need to spend 10 minutes on it. But so then James Franklin comes up. Somebody asks a question. I think it was along the lines, you guys can correct me, of when did you first know that this was an issue? Yeah. And he just walks away. Like, I'll do it right now on YouTube. He just left. Here I am. I'm James Franklin.
Hi, Guardsy.
I'm James Franklin.
Yep.
You hear he just petulantly walks away, and you hear the PR people, including one who I know has been there forever. This isn't like a 22-year-old public relations person. And they're basically saying, guys, we already said we're not commenting on it. The university has the statement, and that's what we're going to do. And Franklin's basically standing there like, you guys are the jackasses, not me. Yeah. And honestly, I don't know if they ever got to Wisconsin questions. I would have walked out and left if I was one of those.
I wouldn't ask one.
Because you don't have to spend. Here's all you have to say. The university put out a statement. It's a tough situation. There's a lot of legal things going. That's all I'm going to have to be able to add to it. Done. Yeah. That's it. But you can't not say anything. You just can't. I'm sorry. And he apologized, Camp Randall, but then didn't really elaborate. Just said, I got to be better. We're all trying to get better, me included, blah, 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 blah. I'm a James Franklin guy. I love the fact a couple of weeks ago that his players were trying to plant a flag at USC, and he went over and stopped them. So I'm not a James Franklin basher consistently, but this was ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
Well, it's a terrible look. And guess what? You're being paid millions of dollars. You're the face of that program. Some ways you're the face of the university.
Right.
And something bad happened in your program. Sorry, you're going to get asked about it. And having someone write a prepared statement is not going to cover it. You're going to have to, again,
and hide behind the PR people.
Yeah. And then it's just like walk off and then no, it's a terrible look. And guess what? You're going to get asked questions. And I wouldn't ask the football question either. I mean, that was not the setting for a football question when that came out that day. And so I appreciate that he recognized that he made a mistake and said, he apologized for doing it, but it should have never come to that. Again, he should have done exactly what you said, or could have done exactly what you said, and said, you know what, addressed it in however way you want to address it by saying, I'm legally I can't talk about this. So, but to just walk off like a petulant, coach who, how dare you ask me a question this serious? Hey, you're in that position. You have to, unfortunately, there are some times when there's some questions you may not want to ask, but you have to deal with them.
I mean, he's the one who recruited the players. He's also the one that makes, I think, somewhere around $9 million a year. As there's a certain college football coach in town said when he took the job, some of us got to, eat difficult
conversations for breakfast.
Yeah, that's what you're paid to do. That's why you're paid so high. And as much as it was even Franklin, when I sent that over to you guys, I was almost as upset with the the communication staff just acting also like the media was just a bunch of jackasses.
Yeah.
What did you think they were going to ask? We have an obligation to ask about that.
Yeah.
All you would have had to do, James Franklin, is say 15 seconds of I'm not going to talk to your point guards. And then, then you addressed it. But the fact that somebody would ask you a question and then you roll your eyes, go back around, the SID people got to come out and then read off another statement. Like,
it's ridiculous.
Both Franklin and the media relations people could have handled that so much better.
But I'll give the media relations people a break in this regard, as they are, Franklin has more power than they do. And which to me is always stupid, because as I've talked about with a lot of, people, not just at the U, but everywhere, what I always say is, you guys are going to be here after the coach. We're going to be here after the coach. Like, PJ talks about it all the time. They had 7 coaches in 15 years, whatever it is. Like, the coach has power, but you also have to be able to tell the coach, look, we got to address it. And I just remembered an example off the top of my head, because as you can imagine, this comes up from time to time when you're hosting the coach's show, right?
I can imagine.
And there's things that that the coach doesn't want to talk about. But thankfully, historically, we've never had a ton of issues with. All we say is, look, we have to ask it, and you go however you want to go with it. But we can't just sit up here, even if it is, and I'm just using PJ as an example, the PJ Fleck show or the Tracy Clay show or the Jerry Kill show, Ben Johnson, Richard Pitino, Don Plitzwhite. Like, we have to ask about it, because everybody listening is tuning in because they want to know what you're going to say about it. We can't just go an hour and talk about Wisconsin, James Franklin. We just can't do that. You have to come up. You have to say something. And I remember, I think it was 2018 when there was the big Star Tribune expose on all the failed drug tests that apparently happened with the football program. And it came out like that day. And you can't ignore that. And PJ came prepared. PJ came straight up prepared and said, I'm not going to tell, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm not remembering everything, but he came prepared, said, yeah, we have a policy that we drug test in our program, and some things came back from that, and it wasn't exactly what the Star Tribune reported, but I'm not going to tell you anymore, and we're going to handle some stuff internally. Like, that's, and he addressed it. Yeah. We didn't need to spend 20 minutes on it, but it was a story that day. It had to be talked about. It had to be asked. Do you think I wanted to sit there? I was getting ready for my second Quick Lane Bowl. What a thrill. But you can't
ignore it.
You can't just sit there and say, we're not going to talk about this. You have to have, and it doesn't have to be any more than that. What is being reported isn't accurate, but we had this come up, and we've dealt with it, and we're moving forward. That's it. That's all you have to say. And you move forward. But to do what James Franklin did was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anything else?
I think it's a good spot.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Burnsy, enjoy your hunting with your dad, because that's why we're doing this on a Monday. Yeah. If you want to know why and this episode is going to be pushed out Monday afternoon, we're giving you a full extra day to get ready for Gophers, Illinois. Not because Burnsy had any, obligation, but he just wanted to go hunting with his dad. And we are a family first podcast, right, Ryan?
That's right.
We are.
It's family, faith, and then football. That's why Chip has been gone for the last month. And, I'm here whenever you guys need me to be here. I've got nothing else going on. Whatever's good for you guys. I'm happy to be here.
You're next. You're next. We'll juggle the schedule for you next.
We may have to. So, and we know that Burnsy has to go hunting on Tuesday with his dad, because Thursday is Halloween, and that day is reserved for Ryan's mom.
That is sacred in the Burns house.
He's walking off. Happy Halloween to the Burns family. See, he's Randy Byrne. There's Chip Scoggins. I'm Justin Gaard. Thanks, everybody. Jack's Cafe is our great presenting sponsor, jaxcafe.com. We'll talk to you next week on the Pair and a Spare podcast.